We're about to explore a name that still echoes through the darkest corridors of ancient Rome. Once a beacon of hope for his people, now a symbol of terror, a Roman emperor whose very name sent shivers through the air. Even the winds whispering along the Tiber River carried fear. But how did Caligula, once called Little Boot, become Rome's greatest nightmare? He was the son of the legendary general Germanicus, a darling of the public, and the hope for Rome's future. Yet when he ascended the throne, that radiant young man vanished, replaced by a monster enslaved by inhuman pleasures, sadistic games, and unimaginable madness. The marble walls of the royal palace still bear the echoes of his whispers, his screams, and the marks of his insanity. This is not just the story of a Roman emperor's fall, it is a story of how power can corrupt the human soul, how unchecked authority can turn a person into a monster. What drove him to madness? The tragic fate of his family, or the throne itself? Get ready. We're diving deep into the terrifying truths of Caligula and embarking on an astonishing journey with him. Are you prepared to uncover Rome's darkest secrets? This story will be unlike anything you've ever known. Before we start the story, take a second to subscribe to my channel and like the video. I would appreciate it if you could tell me in the comments who is watching from which country, and I expect at least 1,000 comments from you on this story. The story of young Gaius, better known to history as Caligula, began in the gilded cage of the imperial family. His father was Germanicus, Rome's legendary general, and his mother was Agrippina the Elder, granddaughter of Emperor Augustus. This noble blood made him one of Rome's brightest and most beloved figures. As a small child, he accompanied his father on military campaigns, wearing little sandals called caligae, like those of the soldiers. That's how he earned the nickname Caligula, meaning Little Boot. At first, it was a harmless, even charming memory, but it could never hint at the dark legacy his name would come to carry. His childhood wasn't so much about growing up as a prince in the shadow of the throne, it was a fight for survival. When Germanicus was poisoned at a young age, the victim of jealousy and palace intrigues by Emperor Tiberius, terror descended upon Caligula and his family. His mother Agrippina was exiled by Tiberius and left to die of starvation. His brothers, Nero Caesar and Drusus Caesar, were imprisoned on charges of treason and died behind bars. Witnessing the bloody end of his family left deep scars on young Caligula's soul. It planted the seeds for the paranoia and cruelty he would later display. The only protector he had was his grandmother, Antonia Minor, Tiberius's sister. Under her care, he survived, but his spirit was already shattered. Then came a turning point. Tiberius summoned Caligula to his villa on Capri. Those years in the palace's poisonous atmosphere shaped him into someone who appeared calm and obedient on the outside, but inside was burning with a thirst for revenge and power. He witnessed Tiberius's cruelty, perversions, and inhuman entertainments. To survive, Caligula learned instinctively to be cunning and strategic. He could read even the smallest gestures of Tiberius and constantly masked his true intentions to earn approval. This period became one of the defining elements of his personality. He was no longer just a victim, he was a strategist who would do whatever it took to survive. With Tiberius's death, a new era began for Caligula in Rome. At first, the public greeted him with overwhelming enthusiasm. The son of Germanicus was now the last living member of his family to ascend the throne and was seen as the hope of Rome. The Senate granted him extraordinary powers, and in the early months, he acted as a wise and generous leader. He honoured his mother and siblings, pardoned the exiled, and staged grand public spectacles. This initial display also revealed how clever and manipulative he could be. He played a careful game to win the trust of both the people and the Senate. But behind this brilliant facade, a fire of vengeance and an uncontrollable desire for power burned, born from the tragic fate of his family. Historians suggest this change began after a severe illness. Though he recovered physically, his personality was forever altered. Some sources claim the disease affected his brain, making him more paranoid and ruthless than ever before. The innocent face of Little Boot was gone. In its place stood a despot intoxicated by absolute power, a ruler without limits. The first victim of this terrifying madness was Macro, commander of the Praetorian Guard, who had once supported Caligula's path to the throne but later fell out of favour. Caligula forced him and his family into a horrifying suicide. This was the first sign of just how ruthless he could be, even toward those closest to him. Now, anyone near him could fall prey to his unpredictable and dangerous moods. Everyone in the palace lived in fear of the emperor's next outburst. Rome watched in horror as the ruler once welcomed with love gradually turned into a monster. This transformation marked not only Caligula's personal descent into madness, but also the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in the Roman Empire. During the first months of his reign, the public waited with hope, unaware that behind the dazzling facade, a slow-moving monster was emerging. He no longer acted as an emperor. He began behaving like a tyrant, claiming to be a tyrann. Roman traditions, laws, even moral codes were ignored. The unlimited power of the throne fed the already damaged corners of his mind, leading to incredible corruption. His madness was not just fueled by ambition, but also by childhood trauma and paranoia. He was now recreating the tragic system that destroyed his family through his own cruelty. Even those closest to him suffered. One of Caligula's greatest pleasures was humiliating nobles, senators, and even friends in his court. After hosting them in his palace, he would expose their secrets, shame them publicly, and make them a subject of ridicule. After declaring himself a god, he forced the Senate to pay him homage. Rome's most respected men had to bow and obey his absurd commands. When he suspected a senator of plotting an assassination, he held the entire Senate hostage, threatening torture. This showed how absolute fear became the primary tool of governance in Rome. His psychological instability also showed in his personal relationships. His abnormal affection for his sister Drusilla shocked Rome. Historians report that this bond reached incestuous levels, with Caligula treating Drusilla almost like a spouse. Her early death devastated him. He mourned her by giving her titles such as Mother of the Empire and All Goddesses. This perverse love highlighted just how disturbed his mind had become. After her death, he sought a new goddess to fill that void. His famous attempt to make his horse into concertatus, a senator and even a consul, became one of the clearest examples of his detachment from reality. It wasn't just a joke or a moment of madness, it was a deliberate expression of contempt toward the Senate and Roman traditions, and it began to erode his public image. Caligula's economic policies were as erratic as his personal life. He quickly squandered the legacy his father had built over many years. Lavish feasts, gladiator games, extravagant construction projects, all drained the imperial treasury. He employed thousands to build palaces decorated with precious stones and even attempted constructions in Egypt purely for personal pleasure, ignoring practical purposes like controlling the Nile's floods. With Rome's economy on the brink of collapse, he imposed new taxes on the public and the nobility, even taxing marriages and brothels. These practices, which defied traditional Roman morals, tested the patience of both the people and the Senate. The absurdities of his rule extended to the military as well. Despite being Germanicus' son, he had no real military skill. He raised a large army to invade Britain, but never fully followed through. When his army reached the English Channel, he famously ordered soldiers to collect seashells, declaring it a grand victory for Rome. This demonstrated how he could turn even military failures into theatrical spectacles. All of these behaviours were the result of accumulated anger, paranoia, and unchecked power. The young man who had once inspired hope was gone. What remained was a disturbed emperor hardened by his family's destruction, constantly expecting betrayal, trusting no one, and seeing everyone and everything around him as part of a dangerous game. And the most merciless moments of this deadly game were still to come. Caligula's madness had grown beyond personal whims. It had become a plague threatening all of Rome. He didn't just see himself as a god. He used the gods themselves as tools for his own amusement. He overshadowed the Temple of Jupiter with one dedicated to himself, filling one of Rome's holiest places with grotesque statues of his own image. Each day he would dress as a different deity and pose next to Jupiter's statue, part of his palace spectacles meant to prove his divinity. Everyone in the palace lived on edge, never knowing what his next act of madness might be. But his most infamous act came when he decided to appoint his horse, Incitatus, as a consul. This was no mere joke or moment of whimsy. It was a clear expression of his deep contempt for Rome's most established institutions, its oldest traditions, and its most powerful men. He dressed his horse like a noble senator, provided golden feeding troughs, and even supplied the finest wines. Senators, knowing it made no sense, had to comply, bowing before an emperor who regarded a horse as equal to a man. This wasn't just a political stunt, it was a psychological blow. Rome's dignity seemed trampled beneath the hooves of a horse. Caligula's paranoia extended to even those closest to him. According to historian Suetonius, he executed his former friend Pascala on suspicion of conspiracy. He even had his siblings Livia and Julia killed, fearing they might threaten his rule. The palace corridors echoed with whispers and fear. No one felt safe. Sometimes, in the middle of a cheerful moment, he would turn to someone and ask, "Do you want me to have your head?" For him, it was a joke. For the other person, a deadly threat. This mindset drove him to commit horrifying acts. Once, during a public gladiator event, he released a group of prisoners into the arena purely for the crowd's entertainment. Their screams were music to his ears. Caligula fed on fear. One of his most audacious moves was the German campaign, meant less for real military conquest and more to elevate his own glory. He gathered his soldiers but forced them to erect statues of himself and stage fake victory parades instead of actual battles. At one point, he even ordered them to collect seashells from the English Channel, declaring it a great triumph. Returning to Rome, he staged a grand victory parade as if he had won a real war. This showed not only his exaggerated sense of military skill, but also how far removed from reality he had become. Eventually, Caligula's extreme behaviour pushed the Senate and the Praetorian Guard to their limits. A conspiracy began to form, not a simple political coup, but a strategic move to defend Rome's honour and survival. Cassius Chaerea, a commander of the Praetorian Guard, had suffered from Caligula's cruel jokes and humiliations, often being mocked publicly. Fueled by a desire for revenge, Chaerea collaborated with Cornelius Sabinus, a key advisor and prominent senator, to assassinate the emperor. The plan was set for January 24th, 41. On the day of the assassination, Caligula was passing through a narrow corridor after attending several performances. Suddenly, the assassins, led by Chaerea and Sabinus, appeared. Chaerea struck the first blow, shouting, "This is what you deserve." Caligula was taken by surprise, and the other conspirators joined in. His eyes widened in shock, showing that even the most ruthless emperor could be struck by fear at his own end. His screams echoed through the marble halls, fading into silence. Guards tried to intervene, but it was too late. Caligula's reign of terror had come to a violent end. This event marked more than the death of an emperor. It was the close of a dark era. Caligula's tyranny had pushed Rome to the edge, yet his assassination proved that the empire could endure. It showed that even the maddest leader could be held accountable, and that Rome still had the power to survive. Caligula's assassination on January 24th, 41, at the hands of his own guards marked not only the end of one of the darkest periods in the Roman Empire, but also served as a harsh lesson in how power can corrupt the human soul. Though his reign lasted only 4 short years, it left indelible marks. He was not just an emperor, he was living proof of how unlimited power can turn a person into a monster. The assassination was a strategic step to restore Rome's honour and resilience. Yet it was not an easy step. Caligula's death once again pushed Rome to the edge of uncertainty. Contrary to what one might think, Caligula's legacy was not entirely about destruction. The madness of his rule became a what not to do guide for future emperors. The Senate realised that an emperor's absolute power must be limited. While the Praetorian Guard gained even more influence after this event, the courage to kill an emperor showed that a leader could survive not just through force, but also with the support of the people and governing institutions. Caligula's personal struggle and tragedy make his place in history even more complex. Though remembered as a monster, he was also a prince who witnessed the destruction of his family and suffered deep trauma. The painful deaths of his mother and siblings left scars so profound that once on the throne, he sought revenge on the world. His madness, in a way, reflected the suffering he endured. This does not make him innocent, but it helps us understand the psychological reasons behind his actions. He was not merely a dictator, he was also a victim of his own trauma. Caligula's role in history provides a unique case study for understanding the dynamics of the Roman Empire and the nature of power. His short but stormy reign was a time when the sanctity of the throne was questioned and the fragility of the imperial system became clear. He may not have been a military genius, but he was a master showman, skilled in propaganda and manipulation. Even the incident of collecting seashells demonstrated his cleverness and cunning, how he could turn failures into triumphs. With his death, one of Rome's greatest dynasties, the Julio-Claudians, was shaken. Claudius, who followed him on the throne, became a beacon of hope for a population exhausted by Caligula's cruelty. Yet Caligula's name remained forever etched in Rome's dark history as a symbol of unrestrained power and madness. Once loved as the Little Boot, the story of how he became a monster leaves one of the greatest cautionary lessons in human history. Thanks a million to everyone who has watched the video so far. If you liked the video, you can write Caligula in the comments, and if you didn't, you can write Nero. See you in new videos and the strange realities of history.